Okay, off we go into human impact. And the first thing on your human impact specification is the reasons for species becoming endangered or extinct. So this is sort of, a guide to human foolishness, really. The first one I really don't think that we can be held responsible for, and that is natural selection. So every species kind of has its sort of natural span of existence, and things change and the species respond, the best fitted survive, and eventually, a species will die out and be replaced by another one, however similar. I did have a sort of trawl through for natural selection examples, and I think the best one that I came up with was the cheetah, and I really don't think we can be held responsible for this. Cheetahs have gone through what's called a genetic bottleneck. So about 12,000 years ago, a huge number of them were wiped out by an extinction event, and now they're genetically so similar that they're, a lot of them have a kink in their tail. They haven't got any genetic diversity left, really. They're all sort of, if we're 99% similar, they're sort of 99.99999% similar in terms of their genetics. So they're kind of, I've got to feel that they're going nowhere in terms of natural selection, and they're just getting less and less and less diverse. So yeah, they're on the road to nowhere. They were the ones I could think of. And of course, in it, there's their population shrinks, they then go into sort of genetic drift. And there was quite an interesting article on the BBC website about mammoths, and how they, as their population decreased, they developed more and more sort of genetic faults, which eventually they think was responsible for their extinction. So potentially that's where the cheetahs are going. Your second one on the list is the very obvious one of habitat destruction. So I'm perfectly sure that you've all seen, the plight of the orangutan. So, for example, deforestation. So as we're deforesting whole swathes of orangutan habitat and replacing it with biofuel, palm oils for making Doritos with, and Oreos, and all the things that, if you look at the ingredients, quite a lot of it will say palm oil on it. So we're deforesting natural forest habitat of orangutans, replacing it with palm oil plantations. The orangutans have nowhere to live, and they're going to die out. The other one that's possibly a bit less obvious is hedgerow removal. So in order to fuel the mechanisation of agriculture, we're removing hedgerows, and they form vital habitats for songbirds in Britain and a range of their insect prey. So they're ones to watch out for. We've got the things that hit the news, like big pollution events. So quite a while ago, big oil spill, the Sea Empress went down and covered the coast of Pembrokeshire with oil. We've got, the Gulf of Mexico, so big pollution events like that, so oil spills, really devastating to the habitats, particularly marine. Again, sticking with the marine theme, we've got PCBs. These are anti-fouling agents used on boats. I don't think they're, I think they might have been banned now. It was found that they were causing female dog whelks to grow penises, which was interesting but not very good for the survival of the species. They were sort of growing false penises that were blocking their vaginas, which meant that they couldn't then reproduce. And of course then other things that hit the news: hunting or collecting. So this is, photographs of smiling people next to dead giraffes and dead elephants, and poachers coming in on helicopters and gunning down elephants, diving in, getting the tusks and going away again. Tigers, all sorts of animals hunted to, and that reduces their numbers. And once the numbers go down, you've got this problem of genetic bottlenecks and all the rest of it that could make them go extinct. And collecting, there was a case recently, if you wanted to look it up, charming gentleman called Philip Cullen, who was actually a member of the Butterfly Conservation Society, which is amazing, was just taken to court, and he was prosecuted for collecting and selling the large blue butterfly, which is astonishing. So the large blue butterfly actually became endangered. Then it was not found at all in Britain, and there was a big conservation programme, reintroduction programme, and in 2004 it was introduced to 9 sites. It's doing well for an introduced species, but by no means is it off the endangered list. And this guy in the Butterfly Conservation Society decides to collect it. The judge apparently said that his defence was absolutely laughable and couldn't be taken seriously. So there we go. And that's the first real case of somebody being prosecuted. You can look it up, it's really interesting. And then we've got, of course, good old competition. And this could be from domestic animals, grazing sheep, cattle, horses, pigs, out-competing, or it could be from introduced organisms. I'll put plants in there as well, because obviously a field of wheat really doesn't grow very much else on it except for wheat, because of the use of herbicides and insecticides and what have you. Introduced organisms, these are ones that could be introduced because of climate change. Back to scorpions in London, so the northerly range increases. It could be that they have been deliberately introduced. So this is as opposed to, sort of the reintroduction of things. These are new things that have been brought in and introduced deliberately, and I think probably the best example of that is the grey squirrel, brought in by some guy who thought, oh, seen those in America, gosh, they look pretty, they look lovely in my garden, and of course their population has just taken off and they're out competing red squirrels. I think that's the most famous example. And of course they can be accidentally introduced. So accidentally, I suppose under that umbrella would include escapees from usually from an agricultural context. I'll put that in inverted commas. I'm not sure that mink come under that umbrella. So for example, the harlequin ladybirds, they're the ones with lots and lots of spots, huge variety of colours. First of all, they're surviving over here because, although they're from Spain apparently originally, the climate's warming, so they're surviving. They can survive further north, and they were being used to control aphid populations in greenhouses, but of course they can fly, and they've got out, and they're now out competing our native butterflies. Anyway, I thought that this was going to be a bit boring because it was just going to be a list, and even if I did it in colour it'd be a bit dull. So I thought I'd introduce you to some colour pictures of invasive species that you might not recognise as invasive species because you're used to seeing them around. So the first one is Himalayan balsam. You can see it's growing very nicely along this waterway. There's no space in between those plants. They're not leaving any room for any native species, any of the things that you would expect to see on a riverbank in terms of grasses and small herbaceous plants and reeds. There's nothing there. It's just balsam. Not really very well fed on by native British species, and these are the exciting ones with the exploding seed pods that are so fun to play with. Please don't, it just spreads them further. Particularly the seeds are carried along through watercourses, and then they land, and then they take over, and they're wiping out everything underneath them. Far more invidious is the Japanese knotweed. I thought I'd introduce you to this one. It's a terrible, terrible plant. It grows from a very tiny bit of root. You can't dig it up. You have to use the most horrendous pesticides and herbicides, and they still, they can still come back from it. They will grow up through concrete. They will grow up through the wall, through the floor of your house and up the walls. And they're very, very destructive. You're not allowed to sort of, chop them down and pop them into your local green skip because of their invasive nature. I'm imagining that these were brought over as ornamental plants for people's gardens. And finally, a little bit of what I would say is a non-accidental introduction, but not perhaps a deliberate introduction. This is an American mink. These were farmed for their fur. So the idea was that you had, your cages full of mink, and when they were big enough, you killed them, skinned them, sold them off to the fur trade. Animal rights activists pretty much objected to that, feeling that the fur was best on the animal, and some releases of American mink are now absolutely devastating the wildlife and particularly the water vole, because they like to live near water. The population has dropped by 95%. So the water vole, one of our lovely native species, completely being wiped out by the American mink, who of course will also be competing with otters and other sorts of aquatic carnivores. There are a huge number of examples that you can look up. Signal crayfish that are out competing fish for food. They carry crayfish plague, which is wiping out our white-clawed crayfish. So, knock yourselves out. Put up invasive species, you'll be certainly taken to a website with big lists.